I want to tell you a story today about a person who, unbeknownst to themselves, through a very, very tiny act of kindness, was able to change history. The man I'm talking about is a white missionary working in black South Africa. At least we think that's the story. We don't know his name. We don't know very much about him. In fact, the only thing we know about him is a 5-second span of time when he passed through the kitchen of an institution, tipped his hat to a black cook that was there, and went out the door to the courtyard. This story is told all over the world. And the reason we know about this 5 seconds of that man's life is because that day, sitting on the floor, was an 8-year-old kid who was the son of the cook, who for the first time in his life saw a white person pay a black person a sign of respect. And he realized the world could be different than the way it is now. That man grew up to be Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who of course is one of the pivotal figures that helped the largely nonviolent transition in South Africa from apartheid to a free and open democratic governmental system. I oftentimes wonder, after I leave this earth, what will be the effect that I will have had on it? And it makes me think about a story I heard from my friend Angie. Angie, I've known most of my life. She lives in San Francisco. I hardly ever get to see her because I don't go down there very often. But several years ago, I was in San Francisco. I called her up. I said, I want to meet you for coffee. But I never got to drink my coffee because I was so gripped by the story she told me, a story I will never forget my whole life long. I said, Angie, my coffee there, what have you been doing the last couple of years? She said, well, I've been answering phones for the 911 service for San Francisco. I said, wow, that's got to be fascinating. I'm sure you have some wonderful stories about that. She said, yeah, it's really dramatic. I mean, you're inundated 30 times a night with calls, a car accident here, somebody's lost their wallet, somebody has lost their child. You're always constantly sending help from one source to a person who needs it. But the frustrating thing about that is you never get the complete story. She says, I have a story for you with a Montana connection. Great, edge of seat, coffee getting cold. She said, I got a call one night, a man with a medical emergency, and I noticed that he was very close to a fire station. So I called the station and I said, get over down the street to this man's address. You've got to hurry because it's either you or death that's going to get there first. And of course, I didn't know what happened. So a few days later I had a day off and I called the fire station. And I said, remember on Wednesday night about 8:30 I gave you a call about this guy? They said, yeah, I remember that. Can you tell me what happened? They said, well, we got there in time. We raced him to the hospital and we delivered him to the emergency room. She said, then what happened? Well, then we went back to the fire station. Okay, so she called the ER and she told them the story. She said, this guy was dropped off by the fire department. Can you tell me what happened? They looked up the record. They said, sure enough, this guy came in. He was in really bad shape. He had been poisoned. And we had to pump his stomach. We kept him overnight. And by the next day, he was feeling very grateful for what we had done. And he was fine, so we released him. So finally, a little bit of closure. That felt good. I said, yeah, that's great. I don't quite understand what the Montana connection is. She said, aha! That's the reason I made the call to begin with. Edge of seat, coffee on the floor by now. She said, I got this very strange call that night. Hello, this is 911 San Francisco emergency. And the woman on the other end said, San Francisco? She said, yeah. She said, well, I don't know if this is a prank or what, but I just thought I'd better let you know. I'm calling from Great Falls, Montana. I'm a survey taker. And I just talked to this man, and I needed to tell you what he told me. As soon as he picked up the phone, he said, "What is the matter with you people? I'm trying to kill myself." Slam. Now we know the rest of the story. Now there are 5 people in that chain, each of whom was crucial in saving that man's life. But the only person that knows the whole story is Angie. So when I left her that day, she said, "You know, if you ever get up to Great Falls and meet a woman who does surveys, could you thank her for me?" I said, "Of course," and I never did run into such a person. I probably never will. But one thing I think is going to happen is when this woman dies and appears at the gates of St. Peter, St. Peter's going to say, "Thank you for all the wonderful kindnesses you did while you were on the earth, all the Sunday school classes you taught." But there's one thing that really stands out for us, and that is a 30-second period on the night of October 27th, 1986, when you picked up the phone and just on the slightest hint that you might be able to help somebody, made a phone call because you saved a man's life. I started this by saying I was going to tell you a story about a person who, with the very tiniest act of kindness, made a change in history. That person is you. And when you get to the gates of heaven, aren't you going to love to find out what it is you did?